Hey, guys, welcome back and thank you so much for tuning in. This is my fourth show. The show's under construction with Danny, and that name comes from the idea of my life is constantly a work in progress. So I just want to say thank you so much to everybody who has been tuning in over the last couple of weeks. It's your support is much appreciated. Today we've got a very special guest who would like to come on to the show, and we're going to ask a couple of questions around some of the impacts that addiction and alcoholism can have on our families. It's a topic that I'm quite passionate about. If you didn't know, I work in a drug and alcohol rehabilitation center that's Glebe House, and one of the things I do very often and on a daily basis is take calls from people with loved ones suffering from addictions, and people are often very lost. So I love this opportunity that we have today, and certainly in my life moving forward, to sort of find out and educate people a little bit more about those social and emotional impacts of addiction and alcoholism on our families. Guys, before we get started, if you're watching, thank you so much. If you wouldn't mind, just drop your comment. Let me know that where you're watching from. I'm very blessed to be coming to you guys live from 3 platforms. That's LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. If you don't mind, drop your comment. Let me know where you're viewing from. Another thing that I'm grateful for is this ability to connect with people globally and all around the world. So please let us know that. And without further ado, I'd love to introduce my guest today, Lani. Lani, I'm going to bring her on first of all. Hey, Lani, we're on. How you
Hey,
doing?
good. How are you?
Very good, thank you. Thanks so much for joining us today. Just to let you guys know, and I'll certainly let Lani tell the story, but Lani's somebody who has been affected by some of those social and emotional impacts of a loved one with alcoholism. Lani, once again, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, good. How are you feeling? I'm sorry I cut you off just before we went
That's
live
okay.
there. You're good?
That's all right. Yeah. Yep,
Lani,
all good.
uh, tell us a little bit about your background, your story. Why are you here today?
Okay, so I am 33, a wife, a mother of 2, and my husband has, he's struggled with alcoholism since probably, I'm going to say late teens. It wasn't a huge issue initially. He was never a good drunk. But it probably was early 20s when it really started to spiral. And once it started to spiral, it happened very fast. It went from being just a bad binge drinking issue to, yeah, really suffering, with addiction. And pretty much, I guess, needing it to function, having withdrawals if he had to try and go without it. So yeah, it spiraled pretty quickly.
It's such a common story, and Lani and I are working on a little bit of a project outside of here, and I'm very grateful that again that we've got this opportunity. And look, Lani, just so you know, like I really just want to give people and family members an opportunity to possibly learn. I'm a man in recovery from drug and alcohol addiction for over 11 years now, and it actually took me a solid 8 years, or maybe somewhere around that, before I really started to understand some of that, those impacts that I had on my loved ones, So, yeah, I think it's very brave of you to tell your story. And I just want you to know that sharing this stuff is very helpful for a lot of people.
Yeah, and look, it's with sharing all this stuff brings a lot of emotion, but I think for me, I know that it could help somebody else by hearing it, because at times it was really lonely thinking that I didn't know anybody else that was going through a similar situation to what I was. There probably was people that I knew going through similar
Yeah.
situations, but it just wasn't spoken about. So, yeah, I think it helps to know you're not the only one. And yeah, if it can help anybody listening, then mission accomplished.
I think you make a great point there about you wasn't sure if there was anyone out there else suffering like you, but what I've learned over the years is that it's such a common thing, you know, like addiction, alcoholism does not discriminate between anyone, you know, like it can get anyone. And so I think it's just that being out the ability to voice that stuff a little more regularly is a little bit hush hush a lot of the times, isn't it?
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
Before we get started and you share a little bit about the story, I just want to let you know, and I just want to welcome everyone who's watching. We've got some viewers coming in from Newcastle. How you doing, Clay? Thanks so much. I noticed someone coming in from the United States, from Missouri. And look, I just want to say thank you, everyone, for joining us. So, Lani, I know that you've got a story, and I know that there's a story that would probably be beneficial to yourself to share with us. Would you mind taking us through in a little more detail, excuse me, what it was like being the wife of someone who suffered from alcohol addiction?
Yeah, look, like I said, you know, there were times that were pretty lonely. You know, when your spouse is off in another, you know, mind frame, and not really aware of what's going on around. It did feel quite lonely. There was a lot of stress with it because I was constantly worried about him. You know, when you're under the influence, a lot of dangerous things happen. You put yourself in dangerous situations. So there was a lot of stress and anxiety over trying to keep him safe. So that obviously had an effect on me because it was my whole focus. It was hard to get those thoughts out of my head. It was like that constant protecting mode, keep him safe, help him, support him. I always, you know, from the beginning, I always knew that there was deeper issues within him. I always saw it as an illness, but I felt that a lot of people didn't look at it as an illness. I feel like a lot of people can be quite judgy with this sort of thing. So I think for me, looking at it as an illness, that's when I knew, yeah, I could walk away. But, you know, if he was diagnosed with any other type of, you know, illness, would I walk away from him? No, I would support him. He's my husband.
Yes, absolutely.
You know, when you love somebody and you can see them struggling, you do whatever you can to support them. So I think, you know, this illness, it's like any other illness. You wouldn't walk away from somebody that you love. You want to support and help them through it. So, but like I said, sometimes that can come with judgment, because you do probably in the process, because of the type of illness, you probably do not get treated so great. I didn't say that in very good English, but you know what I mean. You know, I copped a lot throughout supporting him, but
it's very easy for others to judge and make their own judgments when they're not the ones possibly dealing with it. I think, you know I can do that too, you know.
Yeah, and it's easy for people to say, oh, you know, don't put up with this and walk away. But if they were in the situation, you know, and it was their loved one, they probably would have to think about it long and hard before making a decision like that. Absolutely. So, so I sort of made that decision early on that I wanted to help him. But yeah, it wasn't always easy, but yeah, I made that decision, and yeah, that's what I did.
Sure. Did you know, like, talking about that, like, were you aware of you know, the options, like what options you had? Like, I know when we're talking about alcoholism and addiction, absolutely, very often I discover that a lot of people just have no idea of all of the help available. And I don't want to, well, I do think there is a lot of help available, and you hear the other side of that coin as well. But were you aware of the options out there to get help and support?
Yeah, look, not really. I had no idea where to get help. I do remember taking him to the GP quite early on, because I thought that he needed help with the deeper issues within him, because I sort of thought if we could get those sorted, then maybe you won't be using alcohol to deal with those issues. Unfortunately, we didn't really get anywhere with the GP. And, we were really young at the time. Now, as a 33-year-old, I would say, oh, well, I'm not accepting what that GP said. We'll go and get a second opinion if they're not going to refer you to see somebody. But, we were like, I don't know, 21 or 22 at the time. So we were young. And apart from that, it was Google. I was Googling like a crazy woman. Rehab centres, hypnotism, just anything. Anything
What
that
else?
could come up. I was researching helplines. But yeah, I was pretty desperate to help him, but I didn't really know. Rehab seemed pretty scary. We didn't really know what to expect with it. I kind of think we both had this idea that you go to rehab, you're strapped in a hospital bed. We didn't know what it was about. It wasn't really spoken about. Obviously, now I know a lot more about it. But I felt because we didn't have the money to pay for rehab, I didn't know what else we could do to get help. So, I think these days I realise that there is a lot of help around, but at the time I didn't, until we sort of went down the path of AA. And I mean, everyone's heard of AA. But again, at the time I didn't know a lot about it.
Yeah. Were you able to find out much information just on that? Like, do you have an understanding of what they do at AA?
So we were really lucky that we came into contact with a man that ran some AA meetings in our area. We did get involved with AA for a little while. And as I've mentioned to you before, I also took part in a few of the Al-Anon meetings, which are the meetings not for the person suffering with alcoholism, but, the people supporting them. So, we did sort of go down that path for a little while.
Yeah. So, how did you find those support groups, especially the one for the families, which I believe is Al-Anon? How did you find that helpful for yourself?
Look, if I'm 100% honest, I didn't feel totally comfortable in those meetings. And look, I don't know if there is meetings for different age groups, but I was very young compared to everybody else there. So I felt like I couldn't really relate to them. And I know that my husband felt the same. And look, there could be, this is going back many years ago now, so there could be groups for specific ages now, I'm not sure. But he also felt he couldn't relate because at the time, like I said, I think he was about maybe 24 or something around this time. Everybody in the meetings that he went to, they were all over 60. So not that there's anything wrong with that, but I think he would have benefited if he was in a group with people his age. And maybe that's available and we just didn't know it was.
Oh, so he went along with you to those?
No, so this is when he went to the AA meetings, but when I went as well, it was the same thing. I was very young compared to everybody else there. I feel like we were at different spots in our journey.
Sure.
Different spots in our journey, if that makes sense.
I think it's a really individual journey for everyone, like it all. And I think like attending those type of support groups can be quite intimidating, and it's hard. Like it's my own experience that kind of stuff takes some time of regular maybe attendance before you can start to really hear that message. But at the same time, I want to acknowledge, I feel like what you're saying is maybe some of the group was a bit judgmental because of your age difference and you didn't feel a part of it. Is that what you're?
Yeah, a little bit. And look, to be honest with you, they probably weren't judging me.
No, I don't think so.
They had been in the situation or similar situations to what I had been in. But yeah, I felt that way, and it's probably I was putting my own judgment on myself, maybe. Yeah.
Lani, you mentioned a couple of options that you want. I just want to share a little bit about some of the things that I went through as an alcoholic addict. You know, you mentioned hypnotism, yeah. And this, look, I shouldn't smile. Please just understand that when I smile, it's just because I'm probably a little bit away from that stuff. And often people in my community, when we hear some horrible story, we laugh because we relate to it, you know. And I think sometimes people outside of that recovery network probably just thinking, you know, like, why are they even smiling? I guess we're survivors of that. But hypnotism was one. My poor mum, and this is so related to, you know, I was in addiction for a good 17 years where, and this is what I'd love to be able to offer some understanding to you and maybe to anyone else out there. Like, it was all about me, you know, like the whole time I was in that disease or that horrible state, the obsession and compulsion that just drove me each day is like all I ever thought about was myself. You know, I remember saying often, like, how am I hurting you guys? You know, like, it's hurting me. Like, let me live my own life. At the same time, I'm completely dependent on those people too, you know. But excuse me, I get a bit carried away. But that hypnotism, I remember my poor mum, probably forking out like $240 a session. I think I went to 2 sessions, right? I remember laying on the bed. I was on the nod because I'd used heroin probably, well, I guarantee that day. And I remember like falling asleep, all right? And who am I to say what was working and what wasn't working? But I remember falling asleep and because I didn't want to be there. I just did it because I was always pressured or I had loved ones helping me. But I just went on the nod. I didn't hear anything, and it didn't help me at all. You know, I'd also like to mention I attended religious rehabs. There was one rehab there that was I was hanging with. It was all what's yeah, they were very strict. I wasn't allowed to go out the front door. I wasn't allowed to have smoke cigarettes. They took me to church. And look, the minute I got a chance to escape, I did. You know, I've tried, and I think this is the thing they do with alcohol. Naltrexone. It's this tablet, and personally, I want you to know, and I want everyone out there watching today, I believe in like this complete total abstinence model for me. You know, I tried for 17 years 100 different things, but for me the only thing that worked was complete abstinence. And you mentioned also too that childhood stuff, the stuff that I brought with me that made me pick up my drinking. I believe, and I'm not a, you know, I don't know all the answers, but I believe I needed to address that drinking, the drugging first before I could focus on why. Because if you're drunk or stoned trying to address those things in counseling, like I just explained, I fell asleep during the hypnosis. On top of that, there was a heap of other remedies, things that I'd tried. And I also want to acknowledge that I've studied probably 5 or 6 years over the last 11 years, and I've really become open-minded to this other sources of recovery. You know, certainly harm minimization is a really important thing. So yeah, look, I think that stuff. I just wanted to share that with you. You know that sometimes. So can you take me through, if this isn't too personal, like what would be a day for you? And the reason I want to touch on this is the nitty gritty stuff. This is the stuff that people are going to relate to. But what was it like for you? Tell me a bit more about that fear. Why were you scared at times? Why were you? Yeah, it's like being with
Yeah.
an alcoholic. Can you tell me about some of the bad times?
So I guess you know, the days were different depending on where we were at in that journey. So in the midst of it, when it was at its worst, yeah, there was a lot of dangerous things going on. You know, crossing roads in front of oncoming traffic. Yeah, just drink driving. You know, a lot of money being spent. You know, just not good things. And I think for me, there was the fear of something really bad happening to him. I had this big fear of him, getting injured, dying, injuring somebody else. So there was a lot of anxiety around that, along with, like I said before, this strong need to try and keep him safe. So, from early on in the morning, I would go to work, and all day all I could think about was, where is he? What is he doing? Is he at work? Has he left work? How drunk is he going to be when I get home? Is he going to be there? What kind of night are we going to have? Am I going to get calls from the police? Am I going to get calls from the hospital? Just all of those sort of things. So, yeah, it was a stressful time. And it's not just.
How long did that go on for, like that, in that state of fear that you had?
Look, the anxiety around him drinking started really early on for me, because I think first it started off as a bit of anxiety socially, because, when you go out and you're highly intoxicated, you kind of tend to do things that you wouldn't do if you weren't intoxicated. So there was that side of it. But I think the worse it got, that's when the anxiety started around, is he safe? And just that worry of his safety, basically. Look, I'm going to say it was probably a good 2 to 3 years when things were really bad. The last year before he got sober in particular was a hard year. That was the year I was pregnant. And it was,
with your firstborn child?
Yeah. So that was,
you got two children,
was, yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Well, look, I feel like I want to say sorry. And I guess I've said sorry to my family too. Like, imagine like years of feeling that constant fear. And if it means anything, I'm going through that with a loved one at the moment also, and I have been for the last 18 months. So I know that constant and that anxiety feeling that you just talked about. It's like, yeah, it's a horrible place to be. And I put my family through that for like 17 years.
Yeah.
Hey, Lani, just before we, like, I certainly want to talk about your husband coming into recovery too, because hopefully there's a big change in there. But I just want to there was someone mentioned there was a couple of questions. Hey Sarah, my father was a lifelong alcoholic. He even tried to drag others down in his misery. Yeah, sure, that was me too. I think it was Walter. Walter asked, what advice would you give to the next person? Hey Walter, thanks for your question too. Is there any advice you'd give to somebody else? Maybe me going through this stuff too, knowing what you know today?
Yeah, look, I don't know what advice I'd give to somebody else, because everyone's journey is so different. And look, I struggled through it, so I don't think I could say do X, Y, Z and, you'll get through it easier. Yeah. I think, like I did struggle through it. But I guess I have found, like for me, I kept everything inside, and I hid it from all the people around me, mainly because I didn't want to be a burden on anybody else. Yeah. I also constantly told myself that there's other people in way worse situations than what I am. So I didn't want to sound like I was complaining or whinging, because I still felt like I had things in my life that I was grateful for. So I did keep a lot of it to myself, which probably wasn't very healthy. But I now feel that talk therapy is such a big thing, for me anyway. Yeah, for me anyway, talk therapy has been, really, really helpful. So if I could go back to my younger self going through that at the time, I probably would have dealt with it a lot better if I just opened up and found somebody to talk to. And it sounds so simple now. It sounds so simple now, but yeah, so that's probably, for me, if I could go back and tell myself, to do that. So I'm sure that the talk therapy would, other people would benefit from that too.
Lani, I think you just nailed it on the head. That's what it's all about, communication. When you say talk therapy, am I missing? Is that actually a thing? Is that what it's called, or are you just talking about talking to people when you say talk therapy? Sorry, like,
I don't know if it's. I'm not sure
ah,
if it's.
producing.
I
I
think
haven't
it
heard
is.
that
I
talk
think it is
therapy.
a bit of a technical term.
Hmm.
I could be wrong. You'd know
Yeah,
better than
no,
me.
spot on. No,
Um,
I don't. I don't know that one. That's great. I love that. I'm going to use that if you don't mind moving
but yeah,
forward.
basically, when I say talk therapy, I just mean like getting what's in here out, talking about it.
Yeah,
Then you're getting support from people by doing that. And
yeah.
yeah, sometimes it's scary to talk about things, but I do think it's a weight off. It's a weight off when you get things out. So yeah.
Hey, no, look, so I didn't mean to be ignorant. Then I was just a
That's
genuine
okay.
question. Hey, let me share this with you, and especially, I'm not anyone out there who might be suffering from addiction themselves too. Like, communication is the key to everything. I think I think you make such a great point around talk therapy. In fact, one of my friends, Debbie, just mentioned that talk therapy is psychotherapy. And I believe, like, imagine if you had have begun speaking, and I think it takes a lot of courage to. We have, as a human beings, I had a lot of shame and guilt attached to that trauma and that stuff that I want to talk about. But when we ask for help, number one, and when we share our experience with others, we can find out so much valuable information that you probably were kept in the dark for such a long time. So I,
Yeah.
I just want to encourage anyone out there who might be in your position, or if you're in the position of someone needing help, like, to talk about it. It's such a 21st century thing these days to be, suffering from some kind of addiction. That's for sure.
For sure. And I think too, it's also really important to be able to gel with the person that you're opening up to. So, if you went and saw a psychologist or a counselor and you just didn't gel with them, I feel like that could turn people off opening up. But
Yeah,
sometimes it
totally.
takes
Move
talking
on.
to a few people until you actually find the person that you gel with and you think, yep, I can open up to this person.
Yeah, sure. Um, Somebody else said something. Just 1 minute here. What have we got? Oh, someone's acknowledged Lamar Woods. Hey, Lamar, that about the age gap at those meetings made him feel uncomfortable and to be involved as well. You mentioned that your husband's in recovery now.
Yes.
Tell me, do you mind what's the difference? We've talked a lot about anxiety, fear, some of that horrible stuff that you went through. Um, and I just want to share this for you first, okay? I don't know how long your husband's been in recovery for, but it actually took me quite some time in recovery before things changed. Like, I didn't become addicted overnight. And it took me some time, quite some time, to be able to certainly understand the impacts I was having on others, to be able to practice a little bit of selflessness, because I believe addiction and alcoholism made me very selfish. It was all about me. And it takes some time, but yeah, can you tell us a little bit about what's changed, if anything's changed? How's life for you today?
Yeah, look, so after the birth of my first child, or our first child, I should say,
Yeah.
my husband did go into recovery for quite a few years. You know, they were some of the best years that we had had together, especially, welcoming a baby into our
Yeah.
family. There's all the feels. So yeah, look, he was pretty on top of the world in that time. He was a completely different person. He just had so much drive, was working really hard, just so focused on providing, um, for our family. Um, Training hard, made heaps of new friends. So yeah, he was pretty high
How
on
did
life
he
at that
do that?
time.
How did he do that? How did he just pull up like that?
Look, he is someone that has a lot of willpower when he wants to, um, and I guess you know because we were about to have a baby, that was a big reason for him to want to turn his life around.
Yeah.
And to his credit, he did do it, and was an amazing dad and husband. Unfortunately, in that time there was a relapse, but things happen in life. There's always stressful situations, and unfortunately, there was a bit of a stressful situation that did cause him to relapse. But he's now sober again. So I guess the support just continues, and to try and keep him there, keep him sober.
How's your anxiety these days? I look, don't worry. This is a very common question I ask a lot of people. One of the things I love to do today in my sort of role, almost as a human being, is to observe other people. I love to sort of cheer people up, make people happy. I love to give information as well. But just on that, like how is your anxiety around that stuff today?
Look, I have to say, when he first went into recovery, it didn't take long for the anxiety to go. Once I knew he was on that
Relief.
new path,
Yeah, sure.
the first few times of him going out to social things, and he's come home sober, he'd keep in contact, the anxiety started to get less and less, the trust started to come back, and it really did go pretty quickly. Unfortunately, with the relapse, the anxiety came back for me, but I think this time around I'm lucky that I've been given some tools to work through the anxiety, and so I kind of know what I need to do. Look, it's still there, but it's manageable, I should say. It's being managed.
Yeah, good. The tools, and for you, that's that talk therapy. It's the stuff that you've learned over this time, and that's absolutely what this live stream, this show is about. It's taken 11 years in recovery for me, but I feel like I've got all the tools today if I use them correctly, and I keep using them on a daily basis to sort of get through anything. And I just really relate to that. And I just want to say again to you, Lani, like being someone who has been on the other side of it, and it wasn't until I was really in recovery and understood that I never meant or wanted to hurt anybody, like it was all, I don't even know if I knew what love was, unconditional love, but I never really knew any of the impacts that I was having on my family and loved ones. It was just, I thought, and it's denial. Yeah. It's this denial and this block that I just blocked it all out. And it was never about hurting intentionally anyone. And I think that's, I know my family felt that way at times,
It's funny. Yeah. I always knew that. I knew that it wasn't.
Yeah, in the bottom of your heart,
intentional.
you knew that.
Yeah, I knew it wasn't intentional, but I guess it depends on the person. It depends on everyone's personalities. Like, I knew it wasn't intentional, and I guess that's why there was that strong need to want to help. Not many people want to be an asshole just to be an asshole, do they? It's just there was other things going on, and I don't think that anyone's set out to. Yeah.
I think on that, I think some people do enjoy being assholes, but to be honest, but anyway, that's great. And I love that, and I hope that everyone out there has that hope as well. That in the bottom of your heart, that's what I'm getting from you. That you knew that this wasn't a personal attack. It's we talk about in my community of recovery that us being powerless over that first drink, that first drug. But once I do believe for myself, like once I was able to put down that stuff, stop the withdrawal process, I kind of became responsible then for some of that stuff, but while I was in that craziness stuff, and it's a little bit of a, what do you call it? Like a bit of an excuse to say like I wasn't sort of responsible for that stuff. But I think, afterwards. Lani, is there anything, you got any questions? Is there anything you would like to know? You've been very patient. Thank you so much. There's been a few comments too. Let me just highlight, Debbie. Addiction can be very misunderstood. It's a response to unresolved issues or trauma, and it's proactive response. The field is becoming more compassionate. Thank goodness.
Yeah, and that's what I think before when I said
Thanks, Debbie.
I felt like people could be a bit judgy. Whereas I do think these days there's a lot, like people are a lot more aware, about addiction and mental illness. And I feel like people are more compassionate. Well, I feel that now compared to how I felt before. I do think things are changing. There's a lot more awareness being brought to it, so which is a good thing.
It really is. Yes, there is so much more. Like, look at this ability for us to get on here and share this message with the world today. Like this whole COVID shit is really it's changed things dramatically, and I hope that as we continue moving forward, we can keep sharing that message of hope, faith, and in recovery, and that a recovery is possible too. Walter said, "Thank you very much." He's off to his home group. You're welcome, Walter. Thank you, mate. Heidi's mentioning to hang in there. I just like to highlight these comments just to share a bit of the feedback with you too. But Lani, again, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks for having me.
I wish you, like, this is what I wish you and everyone out there who I talk to regularly, and some people who are in similar positions, like, I just wish you peace, more than anything. Like, because I know that feeling of, it's like doom coming, that impending doom, which is anxiety for me as well. It's the most horrible feeling in the world, and especially if you're not one to drink and cover those feelings. Not that I ever think that's an answer, but it can be a horrible place to be. Yeah,
I think it's hard to describe. If you've suffered with it, you can understand. It isn't nice. When you said that impending doom, that's a good way. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, I'm feeling it at the moment. I'll share. I'm going to share this with you. Like, my daughter's mum's kind of in it at the moment. So and like the love that I have for my daughter, I'm wanting the very best for her and for her mum to be okay too. It's just like this constant 24-hour feeling of fucking impending doom. It's just a horrible place to be. And I know that's what, people feel out there, but more than often, which really makes me so passionate about wanting to help other people on this journey. So once again, Lani, thanks so much. Next week, do an interview with somebody who's in recovery and from compulsive gambling. Compulsive gambling is another one of those massive things out there in the community that I think is unspoken quite often as well. And I just want to share too that the effects of compulsive gambling and is worse than any alcohol and drug addiction, in my experience with the people I've dealt with too. So I look forward to having you guys on the show next week. Thanks again, Lani.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone who joined us today and offered your support. And we'll see you next week. Bye.